The Quiet Ones. Sarah Chen watched the sunset paint Outpost Omega's dome in shades of purple and gold, her weathered hands wrapped around a mug of tea. After 30 years commanding Earth's most elite cyber warfare unit, she'd chosen this quiet colony on the edge of human space for her retirement. The irony wasn't lost on her. The woman who once orchestrated the defense of humanity's digital frontier now spent her days tending to the colony's hydroponics garden. Or at least, that's what her neighbors thought. "Beautiful evening for stargazing," rumbled a familiar voice. Marcus Rodriguez, former Marine Force recon, settled into the chair beside her on the observation deck. His massive frame, still powerful despite his 60 years, made the reinforced furniture creak slightly. "Same time as always," Sarah replied, not looking away from the horizon. "Third week they've maintained exactly the same schedule." The they in question were the Araxian diplomatic delegation that had arrived a month ago. The aliens claimed they were interested in establishing trade relations with frontier colonies like Omega. Their tall, elegant forms and advanced technology had impressed most of the colonists, but not everyone. "Did you notice how they never actually eat during the diplomatic dinners?" Marcus asked quietly, his eyes scanning the empty deck out of decades-old habit. "They move the food around, make the right gestures, but nothing ever actually goes in their mouths." Sarah nodded slightly. "And their movements? Too precise. No wasted motion, no natural variation. Like watching a military drill team trying to act casual." Both veterans fell silent as a pair of colonists walked past, chatting about the upcoming harvest festival. Sarah and Marcus smiled and waved, the picture of contentedly retired neighbors enjoying the evening air. Once they were alone again, Marcus leaned closer. "Meeting tonight. Richard picked up something interesting on that antique radio equipment he's always tinkering with." Richard Okafor had spent 25 years in signals intelligence before retiring to Omega. His hobby of restoring vintage communications gear was well known in the colony. Less well known was the fact that his antiques were actually cutting-edge monitoring equipment disguised to look harmless and outdated. "The usual place?" Sarah asked, taking another sip of tea. "The community center. Bridge club night." Marcus's mouth twitched slightly. "Though I suspect we'll be discussing more than just cards." 4 hours later, Sarah sat at a worn card table in the community center's back room, surrounded by fellow retirees. Richard Okafor's dark fingers danced over a deck of cards as he dealt, his voice barely above a whisper. "Picked up some interesting chatter last night. Our visitors are using quantum-encrypted communications, but they're broadcasting on frequencies similar to what we used back in the Proxima conflict. Once I recognized the pattern, breaking their code wasn't too difficult." "Sloppy," commented Alina Rossi from her wheelchair. The former special operations pilot had lost the use of her legs in her last mission, but her mind was as sharp as ever, almost like they don't expect anyone out here to have serious military experience. "That's exactly what they expect," said Sarah, arranging her cards. "Look at their behavior pattern. They're following textbook infiltration protocols, but they're not bothering to adapt them for the environment. They see a remote colony of apparently peaceful settlers and retirees, and they assume we're harmless." "Classic mistake," Marcus rumbled. "But what are they actually planning?" Richard laid down a card. "Based on what I've decoded, they're advanced scouts, part of something bigger. They're mapping our defenses, our resources, our capabilities. Or rather, they think they are. They don't realize they're getting a carefully curated view." Alina added, "They see what we want them to see. A vulnerable frontier settlement protected by automated systems and staffed by civilians and elderly retirees." Sarah studied her cards, but her mind was racing through tactical scenarios. "They'll report back that we're an easy target. That's what we want. But we need to know more about their capabilities, their true numbers, their tactical doctrine." "I might have something for that," said Marcus. "Been watching their ships when they come and go. Their landing patterns, their drive signatures. They're running silent, but you can't hide thermal emissions completely. I count at least 3 capital ships in high orbit, trying to stay in the planet's sensor shadow. An invasion force, Elena concluded. Probably figure they can take a few remote colonies without anyone noticing. By the time the military responds, they'll have established a foothold in human space. Not this colony, Sarah said quietly, and the others nodded. She looked around the table at her fellow retirees, a signals intelligence expert, a special forces operator, a tactical pilot, and herself, all supposedly enjoying their quiet retirement, but none of them had ever truly stopped being warriors. They think we're harmless, she continued. They see our gray hair and our hobbies and our quiet routines, and they assume we're no threat. They don't understand that we're actually more dangerous now than we ever were in active service. Why's that? Richard asked, though the smile playing at his lips suggested he already knew the answer. Sarah Chen, former commander of Earth's Cyber Defense Force, returned his smile. Because now we have something we never had during our service years. We have time. Time to plan, time to prepare, time to get everything exactly right. And they've given us plenty of that, Elena added. While they think they're observing us, we've been observing them. So, Marcus said, laying down his cards, what's our play? Sarah's smile widened slightly. We give them exactly what they expect to see. A quiet colony of retirees, going about their peaceful routines. Right up until the moment they learn why you should never, ever underestimate retired warriors. Around the table, 4 pairs of eyes gleamed with the kind of dangerous intelligence that comes from decades of experience combined with the patience of age. The aliens would learn, too late, that they weren't observing harmless elderly humans. They were being carefully studied by some of humanity's most dangerous predators. And these predators had all the time in the world to make their plans perfect. Old dogs, new tricks. The hydroponics lab hummed with the sound of environmental regulators as Sarah Chen meticulously adjusted the nutrient flow to her tomato plants. To any observer, human or alien, she appeared to be completely absorbed in her gardening. They wouldn't notice that every adjustment she made to the hydroponic system was actually sending encrypted data packets through the colony's water recycling network. Your tomatoes are looking exceptional, Ms. Chen, came a smooth voice from behind her. Such precise growth patterns. Sarah turned slowly, playing up the deliberate movements of age, as she faced Diplomat Vertol of the Araxian delegation. The alien's humanoid form was almost perfect, but there was something about the way light reflected off their skin that bothered her tactical instincts. Oh, you startled me. Sarah forced a slight tremor into her voice. Yes, gardening helps keep my mind sharp at my age, though I'm not as quick as I used to be. Vertol's smile remained fixed for exactly 2.3 seconds. Sarah counted. We find it admirable how humans continue to pursue productive activities even in their final life phase. In our culture, those of advanced age focus solely on preparation for transcendence. How fascinating, Sarah replied, her deliberately unfocused smile masking the fact that she'd just confirmed another piece of intelligence. The Araxians had just revealed they had no concept of tactical deception through age-based assumptions, a critical weakness. After Vertol left, Sarah activated her subdermal communicator, disguised as an age spot on her wrist, and spoke quietly. Did you get all that, Richard? Every word. Richard Okafor's voice crackled back. Their cultural intelligence is surprisingly poor. They're struggling to understand basic human social dynamics, almost like they never expected to need deep cultural infiltration protocols. Sarah mused. Elena, how's our satellite situation? Interesting, the former pilot replied. They're using their ship's sensor shadow to stay hidden from official colonial defense networks, but they didn't account for the hobby telescope array Marcus and I set up. We've identified 5 capital ships now, not 3. Standard invasion fleet formation. Marcus's deep voice joined the conversation. Got something else too. Been watching their ground troops during their diplomatic tours. They're carrying concealed weapons, but their draw patterns suggest right-handed dominance across the board. No mixed-handedness. Sarah's eyes narrowed. That suggests clone troops, Elena finished. Probably why their movements are so uniform. They're literally identical units. Richard chuckled darkly. Well, that explains why their communications encryption was so easy to crack. They're all working with the same base neural patterns. No individual variation to account for. Sarah reached up to adjust her hearing aid. Actually a quantum computer tied into the colony systems. Time to move to phase 2. Richard, start feeding them the data we discussed. Elena, Marcus, get your teams ready. Let's show them some new tricks. Over the next week, the retired veterans put their plan into motion. Richard's vintage radio equipment began broadcasting carefully crafted data streams that the Araxians eagerly intercepted. Environmental surveys showing vulnerable points in the colony's shield grid. Defense schedules indicating minimal security during the colony's night cycle. All false, all designed to leave the Araxians exactly where the veterans wanted them. Elena's wheelchair, modified with cutting-edge stealth technology, allowed her to monitor the aliens' reactions without being noticed. They're buying it, she reported during their next Bridge Club meeting. Their ground teams are already marking landing zones for dropships, right where we predicted. Marcus, who had spent the week organizing the colony's senior fitness club, nodded in satisfaction. My team has the perimeter mapped. Every one of those landing zones is covered. The automated defense turrets are disguised as atmospheric processors. They'll never see them until it's too late. Sarah studied the bridge hands dealt out on the table, actually a complex tactical map displayed through quantum-encrypted playing cards. Their ships will be vulnerable during the landing attempt. That's when we'll have our best shot. Assuming they follow standard invasion protocols, Richard cautioned. They will. Sarah's voice held absolute certainty. That's the beauty of fighting clone troops. No tactical innovation, no creative thinking. They'll follow their protocols exactly, just like they have with everything else. Elena smiled grimly. And that's why retired warriors are so dangerous. We've spent decades learning to think creatively, to adapt, to improvise. And now we have all the time we need to set up the perfect trap. Speaking of time, Marcus rumbled. When do you think they'll make their move? Sarah laid down her cards, revealing a complex series of tactical calculations. The Harvest Festival is in 3 days. Maximum number of colonists gathered in one place. Minimum security presence, at least according to the data we fed them. They'll strike then. Their fatal mistake, Richard said quietly, was assuming that retirement means we've lost our edge. They don't understand that we're actually sharper than ever. Precisely. Sarah's eyes gleamed with dangerous intelligence. We're not worn out. We're not diminished. We're experienced warriors with decades of knowledge, unlimited planning time, and absolutely nothing left to prove. In many ways, we're more dangerous now than we ever were in active service. The veterans shared knowing looks around the table. In 3 days, the Araxians would learn just how dangerous retired human warriors could be. The aliens had spent weeks watching what they thought were harmless elderly humans pursuing quiet hobbies. They were about to discover they'd been under surveillance by some of humanity's most experienced predators. And these predators had turned every quiet hobby, every peaceful routine, every seeming sign of age and retirement into a weapon. The trap was set. All that remained was for their overconfident enemies to spring it. The art of patience. The Harvest Festival transformed the central dome of Outpost Omega into a swirl of colors and activity. Children darted between display stands showcasing the colony's agricultural achievements, while their parents chatted with neighbors and sampled local delicacies. Above it all, through the transparent dome panels, the stars twinkled innocently. Though Sarah Chen knew at least 5 of those stars were actually Araxian warships positioning themselves for attack. Right on schedule, Elena murmured from her wheelchair, ostensibly admiring a display of prize-winning vegetables. Her fingers tapped a complex pattern on her armrest, sending signals to the hidden defense grid. They're moving into attack formation exactly as predicted. Sarah nodded slightly. pretending to adjust her shawl. The motion activated the quantum-encrypted command network hidden in its threads. Throughout the colony, other retirees received her signal and began moving into position with practiced ease that belied their apparent age. Marcus Rodriguez, leading a group of elderly colonists in what appeared to be gentle stretching exercises, was actually positioning his combat teams. Each slow movement, every careful stretch, placed another veteran warrior exactly where they needed to be when the attack began. "Their ground forces are advancing," Richard reported through the secure channel, his voice calm as he monitored the situation from his radio room, filled with seemingly obsolete equipment. 5 insertion teams, moving exactly as their protocols dictate. No variation, no adaptation. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she watched Vertol and the other Araxian diplomats circulating through the festival. Their movements were more precise than ever, the facade of casualness slipping as they prepared for combat. They still thought they were being subtle. They still believed they were in control. "All teams in position," Marcus confirmed quietly. "Defense grid is armed but masked. They won't detect it until they're inside the kill zone. Remember," Sarah broadcast to all teams, "patience is our weapon here. Let them commit fully to the attack. Let them think their plan is working. The more resources they commit, the more we can eliminate in a single stroke." The festival continued its cheerful activity, but now there was an underlying current of tension, invisible to the aliens but clear to the veteran warriors scattered throughout the crowd. They could feel the attack coming, could sense the shift in atmosphere that preceded combat. It was a feeling none of them had forgotten, despite their years of retirement. The first sign came exactly as they predicted, a subtle flicker in the dome's lighting as the Araxians attempted to disable the colony's power grid. Sarah counted silently. 3, 2, 1. Right on cue, the emergency lights activated, bathing the dome in red warning light. Screams of surprise and fear erupted from the genuine colonists, exactly the panic the Araxians had hoped to create. The diplomatic delegation dropped their pretense, drawing concealed weapons. "For the glory of the Araxian Empire," Vertol shouted, their perfect human disguise shimming away to reveal their true form. "Take the colony. Show these primitive." The alien commander never finished their sentence, because that's when Sarah Chen, former commander of Earth's Cyber Defense Force, triggered the trap that she and her fellow veterans had spent weeks preparing. The seemingly decorative festival banners unfurled to reveal military-grade energy shields protecting the civilian colonists. The atmospheric processors Marcus had installed transformed into automated defense turrets. Alina's wheelchair erupted into a mobile command center, her apparent disability concealing a weapons platform that would make a military battlesuit envious. But most devastating of all was the viral code Sarah had spent weeks seeding through the colony's systems, code that the Araxians had eagerly collected, thinking they were gathering intelligence. Now it activated, jumping from their ground forces systems to their ships via their own secure channels. "Interesting thing about clone troops," Sarah announced calmly as the Araxian forces found themselves suddenly paralyzed, their weapons and systems locked down by her virus. "They all share the same base code structure. Crack one, and you've cracked them all." Around the dome, other retirees revealed their true capabilities. The elderly couple who ran the colony's library emerged with military precision, covering key choke points. The grandfatherly baker, who always had treats for the children, turned out to be an ex-Marine sniper, his rolling pin replaced with a high-powered rifle. "You see, Vertol," Sarah continued, approaching the frozen alien commander, "you made a very basic mistake. You saw our gray hair, our quiet hobbies, our gentle manners, and you assumed we were harmless. You never stopped to ask why so many military veterans chose to retire to this particular colony. Impossible," Vertol managed to say through locked jaw servos. "Our intelligence indicated this was a minimal security agricultural outpost. Your intelligence showed you exactly what we wanted it to show." Sarah smiled, but it wasn't a gentle expression. That's the thing about retired warriors. We have something active duty soldiers rarely get. Time. Time to plan. Time to prepare. Time to make everything perfect. The Harvest Festival was a masterstroke. Alina added, her wheelchair's weapons trained steadily on the alien forces. You were so focused on what you thought was an opportunity that you never questioned why it was such an obvious target. Marcus stepped forward. His powerful frame no longer stooped with age. You should have wondered why a frontier colony had so many retirees from Earth's most elite military units. Should have asked yourself why we chose to live so far from the core worlds. Because this colony, Richard's voice came through the now secure communication system, isn't just a retirement community. It's a fortress, and we are its guardians. Sarah watched as the realization dawned in Vertal's eyes. They had walked into a trap years in the making, sprung by warriors they had dismissed as harmless elderly humans. Every quiet hobby, every peaceful routine, every seeming sign of age and weakness had been carefully crafted camouflage, concealing one of the most sophisticated defensive operations ever created. "Welcome to retirement," Sarah said softly, as her fellow veterans moved to secure their prisoners. "We have all the time in the world to show you just how dangerous experience can be. Never corner the experienced." The Araxian capital ships hung in orbit like massive predators, their weapons powering up as they prepared to support their now compromised ground forces. Sarah Chen watched their movements on a quantum display woven into her shawl's fabric, her experienced eyes catching subtle patterns in their formation. "They're preparing for a full assault," Alina reported from her command center, formerly disguised as a wheelchair. "Standard Araxian doctrine. When advanced forces are compromised, respond with overwhelming force." "Predictable," Sarah smiled. "Richard, Phase 2 is ready." Richard's fingers danced over his vintage radio equipment, now revealed as a military-grade electronic warfare suite. The virus they downloaded is already spreading through their fleet's neural network, just like we planned. Below in the colony's holding cells, Vertal and their ground forces remained immobilized by Sarah's code. The alien commander had maintained silence since their capture, but their eyes tracked every movement of their elderly captors with growing comprehension and fear. "They're launching dropships," Marcus announced, his powerful frame stationed at the Defense Control Center. 5 waves, just like the tactical simulations predicted. These clones really don't know how to deviate from their programming. Sarah nodded, her mind calculating vectors and trajectories with the speed of decades of experience. Time to show them why you should never corner warriors who've had years to prepare their battlefield. The first wave of dropships entered the atmosphere, their hulls glowing with re-entry heat. They moved in perfect formation, exactly according to their tactical protocols, which meant they flew directly into the kill zones the veterans had prepared. "Execute Gambit Rook," Sarah commanded. Across the colony's surface, apparently decorative structures transformed. Solar panels rotated to reveal energy weapon arrays. Atmospheric processors projected overlapping fields of defensive fire. Even the colony's greenhouses participated, their transparent panels polarizing to create a sophisticated sensor network. "First wave is committed," Alina reported with professional satisfaction. "They've crossed the outer marker. No signs they've detected our defenses." "Execute Bishop's response," Sarah ordered. Richard's fingers flew across his console. "Targeting solutions locked. Firing solutions distributed. On your mark, Commander." Sarah allowed herself a small, dangerous smile. The wisdom of age before beauty. Fire. The colony's hidden defenses activated in perfect synchronization. Energy beams lanced upward, catching the dropships in a carefully planned crossfire. The Araxians' perfect formation became their undoing. Each ship's destruction created debris that complicated the approach vectors for the ships behind them. "Second wave is attempting to compensate," Marcus reported, "but they're limited by their programming. They can only respond in predetermined ways." "That's the problem with clone troops," Alina added, directing point defense fire with practiced ease. "No initiative, no ability to think creatively. unlike us old-timers who spent decades learning to improvise. The space above the colony became a graveyard of Araxian dropships. Each wave fell into carefully prepared killing grounds, their responses predicted and countered by veterans who had spent years planning for exactly this scenario. "The capital ships are moving," Richard announced. "They're preparing to enter low orbit for direct intervention." Sarah's smile widened slightly. "Perfect. Just like we planned. Elena, our special surprise is ready," the former pilot confirmed. "Those ships are about to learn why you shouldn't underestimate elderly engineers with too much free time on their hands." As the Araxian capital ships descended, they triggered the veterans' masterpiece, a web of quantum-linked satellites that had been disguised as debris and space junk. Each piece was actually a node in a massive energy web designed by retired engineers who had spent years perfecting the technology. "Execute Queen's Gambit," Sarah commanded. The energy web activated, ensnaring the Araxian ships in fields of quantum-disrupted space. Their clone crews, sharing the same base neural patterns, found their systems paralyzed by the same virus that had disabled their ground forces. Multiple ships reporting critical system failures, Richard announced with professional satisfaction. "Their neural networks are completely compromised. Engine control, weapons, life support, all running on our protocols now." Sarah opened a channel to the Araxian flagship. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of Outpost Omega. Your ground forces are captured, your dropships are destroyed, and your capital ships are under our control. I suggest you consider your next moves very carefully." There was a long pause before a response came. When it did, the Araxian admiral's voice carried a note of disbelief. "How? This was a simple agricultural colony. Our intelligence showed minimal defenses, no military presence." "Your intelligence showed you what we wanted it to show," Sarah replied calmly. "You saw a colony of retirees pursuing quiet hobbies. What you missed was that those retirees included some of humanity's most experienced warriors, engineers, and tacticians. And do you know what retired veterans have in abundance? Time." Elena answered through the channel, her voice carrying years of dangerous experience. "Time to plan, time to prepare, time to make everything perfect. And patience," Marcus added. "The patience to spend years building a trap so subtle you never saw it until it was too late." In the holding cells, Vertil finally spoke. We thought retirement meant you were no longer warriors." Sarah's laugh held no humor. "That was your first mistake. We never stopped being warriors. We just gained the luxury of time to perfect our craft." Now, she returned her attention to the admiral. "Shall we discuss the terms of your surrender?" Wisdom beats technology. The Araxian admiral stood in Outpost Omega's main conference room, their perfect posture unable to hide their discomfort as they faced the colony's true leadership. Sarah Chen sat at the head of the table, surrounded by her fellow veterans, all pretense of frailty now abandoned. "You understand now," Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of command, "why attacking this colony was a fundamental miscalculation." "What I understand," the admiral replied stiffly, "is that we were deceived. Your apparent weakness was a facade." Elena laughed from her command station, no longer disguised as a simple wheelchair. "No deception, Admiral. Just a failure of imagination on your part. You saw exactly what was here. A colony of retirees. You just didn't understand what that meant." "Consider this a lesson in human nature," Richard added, his monitoring systems tracking the now docile Araxian fleet in orbit. "Specifically, why retired warriors are often more dangerous than active-duty soldiers." Marcus gestured to the tactical display showing the complete failure of the Araxian invasion. "Your troops are clones, Admiral. Perfectly engineered, identically trained, following optimal tactical protocols. And that's exactly why they failed. Because they lack what we have in abundance," Sarah continued. "Experience, creativity, the wisdom that comes from decades of adapting, improvising, and overcoming. But most importantly," she leaned forward, her eyes sharp, They lack patience. The Admiral's composure cracked slightly. You spent years preparing for this, just on the possibility of an attack. Years. Elena smiled. Admiral, this colony was designed as a defensive position from its very founding. Every retired veteran who settled here knew exactly what they were signing up for. We've spent over a decade perfecting our defenses, developing our countermeasures, creating the perfect trap. While your intelligence showed you elderly humans pursuing peaceful hobbies, Richard explained, we were actually maintaining one of the most sophisticated defensive networks ever created. Every seemingly innocent activity concealed military-grade technology and tactical preparations. That's the true power of retired warriors, Marcus rumbled. We have nothing to prove, no career advancement to worry about, no political considerations to navigate, just the time and freedom to do things exactly right. Sarah stood, her movement graceful and controlled. Your empire made a critical error in judgment, Admiral. You looked at our gray hair and assumed weakness. You saw our hobbies and routines and thought we had gone soft. You never asked yourselves why so many decorated veterans would choose to retire to a remote colony. The answer, Elena added, is that we never retired from being warriors. We just gained the luxury of time to perfect our art. The Admiral looked around the room, seeing for the first time the true nature of the people they had dismissed as harmless elderly humans. Every face held the kind of dangerous intelligence that comes from decades of combat experience combined with the patience of age. What are your terms? The Admiral finally asked. Sarah's smile was razor-sharp. First, you're going to understand exactly how completely we've compromised your forces. Richard activated a holographic display showing the full extent of their victory. Your neural network is thoroughly infected with our virus. We control your ships, your troops, even your communication systems. But more importantly, we've decoded your entire tactical database. The clone troops' shared neural patterns made it almost too easy, Elena added. Once we cracked one, we had access to all of them, including their complete knowledge of Araxian military capabilities and deployments. So here are our terms, Sarah continued. You're going to withdraw not just from this colony, but from all human space. You're going to provide a full accounting of any other planned invasions or infiltrations, and you're going to do it all voluntarily. Because if you don't... She gestured to the tactical display, where hundreds of other colonies appeared, each marked with indicators of veteran populations. You'll discover that we're not the only retirement community preparing for exactly this scenario. The Admiral's eyes widened as they realized the full implications. How many? Let's just say, Marcus smiled grimly, that humanity's retired warriors have a lot of time on their hands, and we've learned to coordinate very, very well. Remember this lesson, Admiral. Sarah concluded. Technology can be powerful, youth can be dynamic, but wisdom, experience, the patient cultivation of skills over decades, that's what truly wins wars. She stood, and her fellow veterans rose with her, their bearing that of experienced predators rather than elderly retirees. Now shall we discuss the details of your withdrawal? We have all the time in the world to get it right. The Admiral looked at these dangerous humans, not worn out, not diminished, but rather honed to perfection by decades of experience and unlimited planning time, and finally understood. The Araxian Empire hadn't just failed in their invasion. They had learned, at great cost, why retired human warriors are the most dangerous of all. Because they have nothing left to prove, and all the time in the world to prove it.